I never thought my own mother would forge my signature on legal documents worth $2.8 million. Standing in that sterile law office, watching her hand trembling as she pushed the inheritance transfer papers toward me, I felt my entire world shatter. My brother Marcus sat there smirking like he had already won. But what they did not know was that my boss, Detective Sarah Martinez, was walking through that door in exactly 30 seconds. The family I trusted most had just committed the biggest mistake of their lives. Hey, everyone. Before we dive into this absolutely insane family betrayal story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. This story has more twists than a roller coaster, so make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because you will not believe what happens when the truth finally comes out. Trust me, this family revenge story will leave you speechless. 3 weeks earlier, my life was completely normal. My name is Serafina, and I work as a forensic accountant for the district attorney office in downtown Chicago. I spent my days uncovering financial fraud, following paper trails, and helping put white-collar criminals behind bars. Ironic considering what was about to unfold in my own family. My grandmother Vivian had always been the anchor of our family. She built her fortune from nothing, starting with a small bakery in the 1950s and eventually expanding into a chain of successful restaurants across the Midwest. When she passed away last month at 93, we all knew there would be an inheritance, but none of us expected it to be worth nearly $3 million. The funeral was beautiful, filled with stories of Grandma Vivian, tough love, and fierce independence. She had always told us that family comes first, but she also believed in earning what you get. That is why I was not surprised when the lawyer, Mr. Harrison, called to schedule individual meetings about the will reading. What surprised me was my mother, Linda's insistence that we all meet together as a family first. She kept saying we needed to discuss things and make sure everyone is taken care of. My brother Marcus, who had been struggling financially since his third failed business venture, was especially enthusiastic about this family meeting. The night before the official will reading, we gathered at my childhood home. Mom had made her famous lasagna, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Marcus was charming as always, telling jokes and reminiscing about Grandma Vivian's stories. My father Robert seemed unusually quiet, but I attributed it to grief. Then Mom brought out the coffee and dropped the bombshell. "Sweetheart," she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table where I had done homework for 12 years, "we need to talk about the inheritance situation." My stomach immediately tightened. "What do you mean, Mom?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "Sarah, you know how much I have been struggling since the divorce. The restaurant closure really destroyed my credit, and I have got 3 kids to think about." "Okay," I said slowly, "but what does that have to do with Grandma?" "Well," Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "The thing is, honey, you have got your career, your savings, your whole life ahead of you. Marcus needs this inheritance more than you do right now." I stared at her completely confused. "But, Mom, we do not even know what the will says yet. Maybe Grandma divided everything equally, or maybe she set up trust funds for Marcus' kids, or—" "Actually," Dad spoke up for the first time that evening, "we do know what the will says." The room went silent, except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. "What do you mean you know?" I asked. Mom squeezed my hand tighter. "Mr. Harrison called me yesterday. As the family matriarch now, he thought I should know the details before the official reading." My heart started pounding. Something was very, very wrong here. "And," I whispered, Marcus could not contain himself anymore, "Grandma left almost everything to you, Sarah. $2.8 million. The restaurants, the properties, the investment accounts. Everything." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "She—" "What?" "But why would she—" "Because you were always her favorite," Mom said, and for the first time I heard bitterness in her voice. You with your fancy college degree and your important job. She always thought Marcus was irresponsible, even though he has been trying so hard to turn his life around. But that is not my fault, I said, pulling my hand away from hers. I cannot control what Grandma decided. No, but you can control what happens next, Marcus said. Look, I am not asking you to give me everything, just enough to get back on my feet. Maybe half or even a third? Come on, Sarah. We are family. I looked around the table at the 3 people who had raised me, supported me, loved me my entire life. They were all staring at me with expectant expressions, waiting for me to solve Marcus' problems with money that was not even officially mine yet. I need time to think about this, I said. Of course, sweetheart, Mom said, but her smile looked forced. Just remember, family takes care of family. That is what Grandma would have wanted. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Grandma Vivian and the countless conversations we had had over the years. She had always been proud of my career choice, saying that truth and justice were the most important things in life. She had also been very clear about her feelings regarding Marcus' business ventures, calling them pie-in-the-sky dreams, and warning him about taking shortcuts. The next morning, I arrived at Mr. Harrison's office 30 minutes early, hoping to have a private conversation with him before my family arrived. But when I walked in, I was shocked to find Mom, Dad, and Marcus already there, sitting around the conference table with serious expressions. Serafina, Mr. Harrison said, looking uncomfortable. Your family has explained the situation to me. They believe it would be in everyone's best interest if you considered signing a voluntary transfer agreement. I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. A what? Mom stood up and handed me a manila folder. We had some papers drawn up, sweetheart. Nothing official yet, just something to show that you are willing to share the inheritance fairly. With shaking hands, I opened the folder. Inside were legal documents transferring $1.4 million from my inheritance to Marcus. Exactly half of everything Grandma had left me. You had these prepared before we even had the official will reading, I asked. We just wanted to be efficient, Dad said. No point in dragging this out and creating family drama. I looked at the signature lines at the bottom of the documents. This was really happening. My own family was pressuring me to give away money that my grandmother had specifically left to me. I need some air, I said, standing up so quickly that my chair fell backward. Sarah, do not be dramatic, Marcus said. Just sign the papers. It is the right thing to do. But I was already walking toward the door, my mind racing. Something about this whole situation felt wrong, and after spending years investigating financial crimes, I had learned to trust my instincts. That is when I made the decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and texted my boss, Detective Sarah Martinez. Need backup at Harrison Law Office downtown. Family emergency involving potential fraud. I had no idea just how right my instincts were about to prove to be. The next hour was the longest of my life. I paced the hallway outside Mr. Harrison's office, my mind racing through everything that had just happened. My family kept calling through the door, alternating between pleading and anger. Serafina, stop being so selfish, Marcus shouted. I have kids to feed. Honey, please just come back inside so we can talk about this rationally, Mom called out. But I stayed in that hallway because something Detective Martinez had taught me during my first week at the DA office kept echoing in my head. When people pressure you to make quick financial decisions, especially family members, that is when you need to slow down and ask why. When Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, she took one look at my face and immediately went into professional mode. Detective Sarah Martinez was a legend in our office, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes and family fraud cases. She was also the closest thing I had to a big sister, having mentored me since I joined the department 3 years ago. "Talk to me," she said, guiding me to a quiet corner of the lobby. I explained everything: the surprise family meeting, the mysterious advance knowledge of the will, contents the pre-prepared documents demanding I sign over half my inheritance. Sarah listened carefully, asking pointed questions that I should have thought of myself if I had not been so emotionally overwhelmed. "How exactly did your mother find out the will contents before the official reading? Who paid for those transfer documents to be prepared? Why was everyone so insistent that you sign immediately?" As I tried to answer her questions, I realized how many red flags I had missed. Sarah's expression grew darker with each detail. "Sarah," she said finally, "I think your family is running a con on you, and I suspect they have been planning this for a while." "But they are my family," I protested weakly. "Why would they—" "Money makes people do crazy things even to people they love," Sarah said. "Let me ask you something. Have you actually seen the official will? Have you spoken directly to Mr. Harrison without your family present?" I realized I had not. Every piece of information about Grandma Will had come through my mother. "We need to go back in there," Sarah said. "But this time you are going in as a forensic accountant, not as a daughter or sister. Can you do that?" I took a deep breath and nodded. Sarah was right. I had spent years training to spot financial fraud. It was time to use those skills on the most important case of my life. When we walked back into the conference room, my family looked relieved until they saw Sarah Badge. "Who is this?" Dad asked suspiciously. "This is Detective Martinez," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have asked her here as a witness." "A witness to what?" Mom demanded. "Sarah, this is family business. We do not need outsiders involved." "Actually," Sarah said pleasantly, "anytime someone is pressured to sign legal documents involving large sums of money, it is good practice to have an independent witness present. I am sure you understand." Mr. Harrison looked extremely uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting." "No," I said firmly. "I would like to see the original will now, please. The actual document my grandmother signed." "Of course," Mr. Harrison said, but I noticed his hands were shaking as he reached for his briefcase. What he handed me was not what I expected. According to the will, Grandma Vivian had indeed left me the majority of her estate, but there were specific provisions that my family had conveniently forgotten to mention. The will stated clearly that the inheritance was meant to be a foundation for Serafina to build upon through her own hard work and integrity. And it had also included a clause that if I shared the inheritance with family members who had demonstrated financial irresponsibility, the money would instead go to charity. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. "Mr. Harrison," I said, "this document is dated 6 months ago, but Mom said Grandma never updated her will after her first diagnosis." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Well, actually what?" Sarah asked, her detective instincts fully activated. "Your grandmother came to see me several times in her final months," Mr. Harrison admitted. "She was very concerned about her family dynamics." "What kind of concerns?" I pressed. Mr. Harrison looked at my parents, then back at me. "She was worried that certain family members might try to pressure you into sharing the inheritance inappropriately. That is why she included the charity clause." The room went dead silent. "She also," Mr. Harrison continued reluctantly, "asked me to watch for any signs of coercion or fraud attempts against you." Marcus stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We are her family. We have every right to discuss inheritance matters." "Discussion is fine," Sarah said calmly. "Pressure and pre-prepared documents designed to circumvent the deceased wishes are not." That is when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The transfer documents my family had prepared were not just requesting half my inheritance. Hidden in the legal language was a clause that would give them power of attorney over the remaining funds for family financial management purposes. If I had signed those papers, I would have given my family control over the entire inheritance. Sarah, I said quietly, look at Section 4 of the transfer agreement. She read it quickly, her expression darkening. Sarah, if you had signed this, you would have been signing away control of all $2.8 million, not just half. The mask finally slipped from my mother face. You ungrateful little brat, she hissed. After everything we have done for you, everything we sacrificed to raise you, and you cannot help your own brother when he needs it most. I would have helped Marcus, I said, standing up. If you had just asked me honestly, if you had told me the truth about what Grandma will actually said, if you had not tried to trick me into signing away my rights to my own inheritance. We were trying to protect you from making a selfish decision, Dad said. No, Sarah interrupted. You were trying to commit inheritance fraud, and based on what I am seeing here, this appears to be a premeditated conspiracy. Marcus' face went white. Conspiracy? Come on, we are family. This is not some criminal enterprise. But I was already putting the pieces together, my forensic training taking over. How long have you known about Grandma's diagnosis? Mom, how long have you been planning this? The look that passed between my parents told me everything I needed to know. My own family had been plotting to steal my inheritance for months. The revelation that my family had been planning this for months hit me like a physical blow. But as the initial shock wore off, something else took its place. Cold, professional fury. They had underestimated me completely, forgetting that I make my living exposing exactly this kind of fraud. Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice taking on the same tone I used when interrogating suspects. I need to know exactly how many times my family contacted you about this inheritance and when those conversations started. The elderly lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Well, your mother first called about 6 weeks ago asking about the will reading procedures. 6 weeks ago, I repeated. Grandma had only been gone for 4 weeks. Sarah, we were just trying to be prepared, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Harrison, did any of these conversations involve discussions about changing or contesting the will? I cannot discuss attorney-client privilege. Actually, I interrupted. Grandma was your client, not them, and she is deceased, so privilege belongs to her estate executor. I pulled out the will, which, according to this document, is me. The power shift in the room was immediate and obvious. Marcus started fidgeting with his phone. Dad was staring at his hands, and Mom looked like she was calculating her next move. As the executor of Vivian Matthews' estate, I continued formally, I am requesting full disclosure of all communications between this law office and any members of my family regarding this inheritance. Mr. Harrison sighed heavily. Your mother called me 2 weeks after the funeral. She said the family was concerned about your emotional state and whether you were equipped to handle such a large inheritance responsibly. My emotional state? I asked incredulously. She suggested that perhaps a family trust would be more appropriate with multiple family members as trustees. Sarah and I exchanged looks. A family trust with the multiple trustees would have given my parents and Marcus legal control over the money while technically keeping it in my name. What did you tell her? Sarah asked. I told her that your grandmother was very specific about her wishes. The inheritance was to go directly to Serafina with no trusts or family management structures. Marcus suddenly stood up. You know what? This is insane. I am not going to sit here and be treated like a criminal for wanting my sister to share her good fortune with her family. Sit down, Marcus, I said sharply. We are not done here. You cannot tell me what to do. You are not my boss. Actually, Sarah said, pulling out her badge. "I can tell you to sit down, because right now you are all persons of interest in a potential fraud investigation." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Now wait just a minute," Dad said, speaking up for the first time. "No one has committed any crimes here." "Really?" I said, standing up and walking to the whiteboard in Mr. Harrison's conference room. My forensic training was kicking into high gear now. "Let me walk you through what I see." I started writing on the board. Timeline: Grandma passes away 4 weeks ago. 2 weeks later, Mom calls lawyer asking about my emotional fitness and suggesting family trust structure. 6 weeks ago, before Grandma even died, Mom starts asking about will reading procedures. I turn to face my family. "That last one is particularly interesting because it means you were planning this while Grandma was still alive." Mom's face went pale. "That is not. I was just being responsible." "Were you?" I continued writing. "Pre-prepared legal documents designed to transfer wealth while hiding power of attorney clauses. False claims about advanced knowledge of will contents. Coordinated family pressure campaign immediately following the funeral." Marcus tried to interrupt. "Sarah, you are being paranoid." "Am I, Sarah? What do you call it when multiple people work together to defraud someone of money through deception and coercion? Conspiracy to commit theft," Sarah said grimly. "And depending on the amounts involved, it could be a federal crime." That is when my phone rang. It was my cousin, Jessica, Grandma, other grandchild, who lived in California. "Jess," I answered, putting her on speaker. "I am actually in the middle of something." "Sarah, thank God you answered. I just got the weirdest call from your mom. She said there was some problem with Grandma Will and that you might contest it. She wanted to know if I would be willing to testify about your mental state after the funeral." The room went absolutely silent. "She wanted you to testify about my mental state," I repeated slowly. "Yeah, she said you had been acting erratic and making poor financial decisions and that the family was worried about you handling a large inheritance. She asked if I remembered you seeming unstable at the funeral." I stared at my mother, who was now avoiding eye contact completely. "Jess, did you tell her you would testify?" "Of course not." "You seemed perfectly fine at the funeral." "Sad, but fine." "That is why I am calling. The whole thing seemed really strange. Why would she be asking me to lie about your mental state?" Marcus made a break for the door, but Sarah was faster. "Sit back down," she ordered. "Nobody is leaving until we finish this conversation." I hung up with Jessica and turned to face my family. "So now we have conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud and attempted witness tampering. Anything else you would like to add to the list?" That is when Dad finally cracked. "It was not supposed to happen like this," he said quietly. "Marcus really is desperate, Sarah. He owes money to some very bad people." "What kind of bad people?" Sarah asked sharply. "Loan sharks," Marcus admitted. "I borrowed money for the restaurant, and when it failed..." He trailed off. "How much money, Marcus?" $800,000. I felt like I had been slapped. 800,000, Marcus? How could you be so irresponsible? "They said they would hurt my kids if I do not pay them back by the end of the month," he whispered. Suddenly the whole picture became clear. This was not just about greed or family jealousy. My family had been trying to steal my inheritance to pay off Marcus' gambling debts to dangerous criminals. "So your plan," I said slowly, "was to trick me into signing over my inheritance so you could give $800,000 to loan sharks." "We were going to tell you eventually," Mom said desperately. "We just needed to handle the situation first." "Handle the situation with money that was not yours," Sarah pointed out. "She is family," Mom exploded. "Family helps each other. Family does not lie to each other," I shot back. family does not forge signatures or prepare fraudulent documents or try to manipulate witness testimony. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. I feel I should mention that there is one more provision in your grandmother will that I have not yet shared. We all turned to look at him. Your grandmother anticipated that there might be attempts to coerce or defraud you regarding this inheritance. She included a clause stating that if any family member attempted to do so, they would be permanently barred from receiving any benefits from her estate, including the small memorial gifts she had planned to leave them. What memorial gifts? Marcus asked. She had planned to leave each of her children and grandchildren $25,000 as memorial gifts regardless of the main inheritance distribution. I did quick math. So, between Mom, Dad, you, and Jessica, that would have been $100,000 in memorial gifts. Would have been more, Mr. Harrison confirmed. But the fraud attempt has triggered the exclusion clause. The irony was devastating. In their greed to steal my inheritance, my family had cost themselves the money Grandma actually had intended for them to have, but I was not done uncovering their betrayal yet. The deepest revelation was still to come. What happened next still gives me chills when I think about it. As we sat in that conference room surrounded by the wreckage of my family's failed fraud attempt, my phone buzzed with a text message that would expose the true depth of their betrayal. The message was from my bank's fraud department. Unusual activity detected on your accounts. Please call immediately. Sarah saw my expression change. What is it? With trembling fingers, I dialed the number. The conversation that followed revealed the most shocking twist yet. Miss Matthews, the bank representative said, we have detected several attempts to access your accounts using what appears to be forged documentation. Someone has been trying to obtain detailed financial statements and account access using a power of attorney document that our security team flagged as suspicious. My blood turned to ice. When did these attempts start? The first attempt was made 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, right after Grandma's funeral. I looked directly at my mother. Mom, did you try to access my bank accounts? The silence in the room was deafening. How could you know my account information? I pressed. That is when Dad broke down completely. She has been planning this since Vivian got sick, Sarah. She made copies of your documents when you stayed at the house during Grandma's final weeks. What documents? Sarah demanded. Bank statements, tax returns, everything Sarah left in her old bedroom when she was helping care for Vivian. I felt like I was going to be sick. While I was spending my weekends taking care of my dying grandmother, my own mother was going through my personal papers and planning to steal my inheritance. But the betrayal went even deeper than I could have imagined. Mr. Harrison was looking through his files with increasing agitation. I am finding some very disturbing discrepancies here, he said. What kind of discrepancies? Sarah asked. It appears that someone has been calling my office, impersonating Serafina, asking detailed questions about the inheritance and estate procedures. I had never called his office, not once. The calls came from a number registered to Linda Matthews. Mr. Harrison continued reading from his notes. My mother had been impersonating me to gather information about my own inheritance. Sarah was taking detailed notes, now building what I recognized as a criminal case. Linda, I need you to understand something. Identity theft, fraud, attempted theft of an inheritance, and conspiracy are all serious felonies. We are talking about potential prison time. That is when Marcus played his final desperate card. You want to know the real truth, Sarah, he said, his voice filled with venom. Grandma did not even like you that much. You want to know why she left you everything, because she was getting senile and Mom convinced her that I was irresponsible. Marcus, shut up, Mom hissed. But he was beyond caring now. Mom spent months visiting Grandma, telling her stories about my failures, making sure she would not leave me anything significant. She manipulated a dying old woman to make sure her precious daughter got everything. The room erupted into chaos. Mom started screaming at Marcus to stop talking. Dad was trying to calm everyone down, and Mr. Harrison looked like he wanted to call security. But I was laser focused on what Marcus had just revealed. "Are you saying Mom manipulated Grandma into changing her will?" "Ask her about the recording," Marcus said spitefully. "What recording?" Sarah and I said simultaneously. Mom went completely white. Marcus pulled out his phone. She was so proud of herself, she recorded one of her conversations with Grandma to prove how clever she was being. The audio file he played next destroyed any remaining doubt about my family's guilt. It was Mom's voice, clear as day. "You know, Vivian, Marcus just made another terrible business decision. He borrowed money from dangerous people again. I am so worried about what would happen if he inherited money directly. He would just gamble it away or lose it to those awful creditors. Sarah, though, she is so responsible. She could handle a large inheritance and maybe help the family when we really need it." Grandma's frail voice responded. "You think Sarah would share with Marcus if he really needed help?" "Oh, absolutely," Mom's voice continued. "Sarah has such a good heart. She would never let her brother suffer if she had the means to help him." The recording continued for several more minutes, with Mom systematically convincing my dying grandmother that leaving me the inheritance would somehow benefit the whole family. When it ended, I felt like I had been hit by a truck. My mother had not just stolen from me. She had manipulated my beloved grandmother during her final months, using her love for our family against her. "She played that recording for me last week," Marcus said quietly. "She was bragging about how she had secured our family's future. She said once you signed the transfer papers, we would all be set." Sarah was already on her phone calling for backup. "I need a full financial crimes unit at Harrison Law Office downtown. We have multiple suspects in custody for inheritance fraud, identity theft, and elder manipulation." "Wait," I said, something else occurring to me. "If Mom was manipulating Grandma to change the will in my favor, why are you all now trying to steal it from me?" Dad answered, this time his voice hollow with defeat. "Because the plan was always for you to share it with us. Your mother convinced herself that you would just naturally give us what we needed once you inherited. But when I did not immediately offer to solve Marcus's problems, you decided to take it by force," I concluded. "We did not think you would be so selfish." Mom said, her mask finally completely off. "After everything we have done for you, we thought you would want to help your family." That word, selfish, hit me like a physical blow. After spending my weekends caring for Grandma, after building a career helping fight financial crimes, after being raised to believe that family means everything, I was being called selfish for not wanting to hand over my inheritance to pay my brother's gambling debts. But the final revelation was still coming. Sarah had been quietly reviewing the bank fraud report while we talked. She looked up with an expression of grim satisfaction. "Sarah, you need to see this." She showed me the attempted access logs from my bank. The forged power of attorney documents had not just been attempts to steal my inheritance. They had been attempts to access my personal savings accounts as well. My family had not just been planning to steal Grandma's money. They had been planning to steal everything I had worked for. The fraud attempt had targeted my entire life savings, $43,000, that I had carefully accumulated over 5 years of hard work. As police sirens wailed in the distance, I looked at the 3 people who had raised me, who had taught me about love and loyalty and family values, and realized that I had been living with strangers my entire life. The family I thought I knew had never existed at all. The next few hours passed in a blur of police interviews, evidence collection, and the systematic dismantling of everything I had believed about my family. Detective Martinez had called in a full financial crimes unit, and our quiet law office meeting had transformed into an active crime scene. Officer Rebecca Thompson, a specialist in family fraud cases, took my detailed statement while Sarah coordinated with the bank's security team and the district attorney's office. The scope of my family's deception was even broader than we had initially discovered. Miss Matthews, Officer Thompson said, reviewing her notes, based on the evidence we have collected, your family has committed at least 7 distinct felonies. We are talking about a minimum of 15 years in prison if convicted on all counts. I watched through the conference room window as my parents and Marcus were placed in handcuffs. Mom was crying and begging to speak with me while Dad looked like he had aged 10 years in the past 2 hours. Marcus was silent, staring at the floor with the expression of someone whose world had completely collapsed. The hardest part was that despite everything they had done, my heart was breaking for them. "Sarah," Mom called out as the officers prepared to escort her to the police car. "Please, honey, you have to understand. We never meant for it to go this far." I found myself walking over to her, even though Sarah had advised me to avoid contact until after the formal charges were filed. "How far did you mean for it to go, Mom?" I asked quietly. She was sobbing now, her careful composure completely shattered. "We just needed you to help us. Marcus's life is in danger. Those people he owes money to, they are not going to wait much longer." "So you thought it was okay to steal from me?" "We were not stealing," she insisted. "We were family. Everything we did for family." But Officer Thompson interrupted before I could respond. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." As I watched my mother being driven away in a police car, my phone started buzzing with messages. Word was spreading through our extended family network, and the reactions were exactly what I had expected. My Aunt Carol, Mom's sister. "Sarah, what have you done? How could you have your own mother arrested? My cousin David? This is insane. They are your family. You could have just worked things out." Uncle Pete: "Your grandmother would be rolling over in her grave if she knew you had chosen money over family." Each message felt like another knife twist. The narrative was already being written, and I was cast as the villain who had destroyed her own family over money. Sarah found me in the hallway, reading these messages with tears streaming down my face. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently. "Everyone thinks I am the monster here," I said. "My own family is telling people that I had my parents arrested because I would not share my inheritance." "What do you think your grandmother would say about what they did?" I thought about that for a long moment. Grandma Vivian had been tough as nails, but she had also been scrupulously honest. She had built her fortune through decades of hard work and careful decisions. She had always told me that the most important thing in life was being able to sleep at night with a clear conscience. She would say that actions have consequences, I said finally, and that family does not lie to family. "Your family made their choices, Sarah. You are not responsible for the consequences of their actions." But the consequences were already spiraling beyond just criminal charges. Mr. Harrison approached us with another devastating update. "I have been reviewing the estate documents more carefully, and I'm afraid there are additional complications." "What kind of complications?" I asked. "Your mother's manipulation of your grandmother during her final months may have legal implications for the entire will. If we can prove that your grandmother's decisions were made under false pretenses or coercion, the inheritance distribution could be challenged." My heart sank. Meaning what exactly? Meaning the will could be invalidated and the estate could revert to the standard legal distribution among all heirs. After everything my family had put me through, I might still lose the inheritance anyway. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by legal documents, police reports, and evidence bags. Sarah had stayed with me ordering pizza and helping me process the magnitude of what had happened. "I keep thinking about the recording," I said. "The way Mom manipulated Grandma. What if she's right? What if I do not deserve this inheritance because it was based on lies?" Sarah, your mother lied to your grandmother, but that does not mean your grandmother's love for you was fake. You spent every weekend for 6 months taking care of her. You were the one who held her hand in the hospital. You were the one who made sure she was comfortable and surrounded by people who cared about her. But Marcus has kids. He really is in trouble with these loan sharks. What if something happens to his children because I would not help? Sarah set down her slice of pizza and looked at me seriously. Let me ask you something. If Marcus had come to you honestly, told you about his debts, and asked for help, what would you have done? I thought about it. I probably would have helped him. Maybe not with the full 800,000, but I would have helped. Right. Because you are a good person who loves her family. But that is not what they did. They chose to lie, steal, and manipulate instead of trusting you to do the right thing. My phone rang. It was Marcus calling from jail. Sarah, he said when I answered, I am so sorry. I know you probably hate me right now, but I need you to know that I never wanted it to happen like this. Then why did you let it happen, Marcus? Because I was desperate. Because those people I owe money to, they are not just threatening me. They are threatening my kids. They know where Emma goes to school, where Jake plays soccer. I was so scared that I could not think straight. So you decided to steal from me. Mom said it was not really stealing. She said you would understand eventually, that you would want to help once you knew how bad things were. Marcus, I would have helped you if you had just asked. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You would have. Of course I would have. You are my brother. But now I do not even know who you are anymore. The call ended with Marcus crying, and I felt like my heart was being torn in half. Over the next week, as the legal proceedings moved forward, I learned just how deep the betrayal went. My family had been planning this fraud for months, researching inheritance law, consulting with multiple lawyers, and building their case for why I was unfit to handle the money. They had been so confident in their plan that they had already spent money they did not have, including putting a down payment on a house for Marcus and making promises to his creditors. The house of cards was collapsing, and I was the only one left standing. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where my world had been turned upside down, but this time I was there for the final resolution of both the criminal case and the estate settlement. The journey to get here had been the most painful and transformative experience of my life. The criminal trial had been swift and decisive. Mom received 3 years in prison for elder manipulation, inheritance fraud, and identity theft. Dad got 2 years for conspiracy and aiding in the fraud attempt. Marcus received 5 years, not just for the inheritance fraud, but also for the money laundering charges that had emerged when investigators discovered he had been funneling money through fake business accounts to hide it from his creditors. The irony was devastating. In trying to steal my inheritance to pay off his gambling debts, Marcus had committed crimes that carried far worse consequences than the loan sharks ever could have imposed. But the most unexpected twist came during the estate settlement hearing. Judge Patricia Williams had spent weeks reviewing all the evidence, including the recording of Mom manipulating Grandma and the extensive documentation of their fraud attempt. Her decision surprised everyone, including me. While it is true that Mrs. Linda Matthews influenced Mrs. Vivian Matthews' final will changes through deceptive means, Judge Williams announced, the evidence clearly shows that the deceased's fundamental wishes to provide for her granddaughter Serafina remained consistent throughout her life. The manipulation involved convincing Mrs. Vivian Matthews to trust that Serafina would share appropriately with family, not changing her desire to leave her granddaughter well provided for. The judge continued, furthermore, Mrs. Vivian Matthews included specific anti-fraud provisions in her will, demonstrating that she was aware of potential family pressure and specifically wanted to protect her granddaughter's inheritance from exactly the kind of coercion that was attempted. The inheritance was upheld in full, but winning felt hollow when I thought about the cost. My family relationships were destroyed. My extended family had mostly sided against me, and I had learned that the people I trusted most in the world had been planning to betray me for months. That is when Detective Martinez, who had become like an older sister to me through this whole ordeal, suggested something that changed my perspective completely. "You know what your grandmother's real gift was?" Sarah asked as we sat in my apartment after the final hearing. "It was not just the money. It was showing you who your real family is." She was right. Through this whole nightmare, I had discovered that family is not just about blood relations. My real family had turned out to be the people who stood by me when everything fell apart. Sarah had worked countless unpaid hours helping me navigate the legal system. My cousin Jessica had flown in from California to testify on my behalf, despite pressure from other family members to stay out of it. Mr. Harrison, despite being caught in the middle of a family war, had maintained his professional integrity and protected my grandmother's true wishes. Even more surprising was the support I received from my colleagues at the district attorney's office. When word got out about what had happened instead of judgment or gossip, I found understanding and solidarity. Apparently, family financial fraud was more common than I had realized, and several of my colleagues had their own stories of relatives who had tried to steal from them. My supervisor, District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, called me into her office 3 months after the trial. "Sarah," she said, "I have been watching how you handled this situation, and I am impressed. You could have quietly paid off your brother's debts to avoid the family drama. You could have signed those papers and hoped everything would work out. Instead, you stood up for yourself and for your grandmother's wishes, even when it was the hardest thing in the world to do." "It did not feel brave," I admitted. "Most of the time, it just felt awful." "That is exactly what makes it brave," she said. "And it is also why I am offering you a promotion. We have an opening for a senior financial crimes investigator specializing in family fraud cases. Your experience with this case, both professional and personal, makes you uniquely qualified to help other people who are going through what you went through." The new position came with a significant salary increase and the opportunity to lead my own team. More importantly, it gave me a chance to turn my painful experience into something that could help other people. Over the next year, I worked on dozens of cases involving family members stealing from each other. I met elderly people whose children had forged their signatures on property deeds. I met young adults whose parents had destroyed their credit by opening accounts in their names. I met siblings who had been manipulated into signing away their rights to family businesses. Each case reminded me that I was not alone and that standing up for myself had been the right choice even when it felt impossible. The hardest part was dealing with my extended family's reaction. Most of my aunts, uncles, and cousins believed that I should have just paid Marcus's debts and kept the family together. They saw my decision to press criminal charges as cruel and vindictive. But a funny thing happened as time passed. Some family members started reaching out privately, admitting that they had suspected something was wrong with Marcus's story all along. Others shared their own experiences with family members who had financial boundary issues. My cousin Jessica became one of my closest friends, and we started a tradition of spending holidays together, creating new family traditions that were based on honesty and mutual respect instead of manipulation and guilt. The most surprising reconciliation came from an unexpected source. Marcus's ex-wife Diana reached out to me 6 months after the trial. She wanted to thank me for exposing Marcus's gambling problem because it helped her win full custody of their children. "I always knew something was wrong with his finances," she told me over coffee. "But he was so good at manipulating the situation, making me feel like I was being paranoid or controlling. When the police investigation revealed the extent of his debts and his fraudulent activities, it finally validated everything I had been worried about." Diana and I developed a friendship, and I became an honorary aunt to her 3 children. They knew me as Aunt Sarah, who helped keep them safe, and their innocent acceptance helped heal some of the wounds left by my biological family's betrayal. As for the money itself, I used it exactly as Grandma Vivian had intended. I paid off my student loans, bought a modest house, and invested the rest wisely. I also established a small foundation to help victims of family financial fraud access legal representation, something I had learned was desperately needed during my own case. Looking back now, I realize that my family's betrayal, as painful as it was, gave me something invaluable, the knowledge that I could stand up for myself even when it cost me everything I thought I cared about. It taught me the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can do for them. Most importantly, it taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is setting boundaries, even when those boundaries destroy relationships that were never as healthy as you believed them to be. So here is my question for all of you watching this story unfold. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what was right? Have you experienced that moment when you realized that someone you trusted was manipulating you? Drop a comment below and share your story. I read every single one, and sometimes sharing these experiences helps other people realize they are not alone in dealing with family drama and financial manipulation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me reach more people who might need to hear these stories. And share this video with anyone who might be dealing with their own family financial drama. Sometimes knowing that others have survived similar situations can give people the courage they need to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, real family supports your growth and happiness. Anyone who tries to manipulate or steal from you, regardless of blood relation, is not acting like family. You deserve relationships built on honesty, respect, and genuine love. Trust yourself, set those boundaries, and do not let anyone convince you that protecting yourself makes you the villain. Take care of yourselves out there, and I will see you in the next video.